It's a lockdown crossover. Minnesota Twins and Chicago White Sox. In just a moment, I'll be joined by Brandon Warne, host of Locked On Twins. The White Sox are 8-21 and trail the first place Twins by 9 games in the AL Central standings. Is it possible for our Chicago White Sox to completely forget about the month of April and start playing the type of baseball we thought they were capable of before the season started? Tim Anderson makes his return as the White Sox try to win back-to-back games for the first time all year against the visiting Minnesota Twins.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Sox fans, welcome to Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen each and every day. We're free and available on all platforms. Follow us on Twitter at Locked On Sox. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Just search Locked On White Sox. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Hey, I'm your host, Nick Murawski, a lifelong diehard Chicago White Sox fan, recording this podcast just blocks from the ballpark in beautiful Bridgeport. You can find me on Twitter at Nick_GGTB. Locked On White Sox is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. White Sox play host to the Minnesota Twins on Tuesday. Michael Kopech on the hill for the Sox. Catch every pitch of the White Sox hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search White Sox. Can the Chicago White Sox build off of that walk-off win by Andrew Vaughn? Finally, maybe win 2 games in a row. Well, the first place visiting Twins are in town. And I've got Brandon Warne from Locked On Twins to break down this series. Brandon, thank you for joining the podcast.
Yeah, and I wanted to make sure I was good with the dress code.
Yeah.
So
I
think we're all good there. But Nice to be with you, though. I'm glad to be here. Glad to have my microphone on because I recorded about a 35-minute episode today without a microphone on, and that's problematic.
Yeah, well, you guys have a first place team. People want to hear what you're saying. 17-12, the Athletic just came out with their power rankings. You guys are at number 11. You are on top of the AL Central, the only team in the division with a over 500 record. How would you grade your Minnesota Twins after the first month?
Yeah, not only that, but the only team in the division with a positive run differential.
Yeah.
You look at the East, and they're all above water. So, I was looking on ESPN, and they had, I think, a B+, and I think that's a little on the low side when you adjust for expectations, maybe external expectations. I'd go A-. Certainly, it's not ideal to drop 2 or 3 to the Nationals. It was cold, but the conditions are the same for both teams. And so they had one game that just kind of slipped out of their grasp that made no sense at all. And they've had a couple games like that where there was one against the Royals too this last weekend on, I think, Thursday or Saturday that they got away from them. But other than that, they've pretty much taken care of business, keeping Byron Buxton healthy and filling in some gaps when guys have gotten hurt. For the most part, they've been about as good as I had hoped for. And if people don't know, 17-12 is about a 95 win pace. So while it doesn't maybe feel all that impressive right now, it over the full haul of a season would be a pretty good season.
A lot of noise being made, like among some Sox fans. Hey, the Southsiders had a tough April schedule that could contribute to where the Sox are at right now. I don't particularly buy into that. How was the strength of schedule, in your opinion, for the Twins in April?
I haven't looked at like any official data on it, but when I look at it and kind of assess the landscape, it outside of the 3 between the Twins and the White Sox, which you kind of just take off the radar for all intents and purposes. It's KC, Miami, KC some more, Yankees, Astros, Red Sox. The Yankees and the Red Sox right now, for all intents and purposes, are about the same baseball team. They came into Monday with the same record, home and away and overall, similar run differential. And when I saw those teams, they did not feel like teams that were going to be impossible to beat. Houston was not at the top of their game, and so honestly, it was a decent enough schedule. But at the same time, if you look at the AL landscape on the whole, if Houston isn't as good as you think they're going to be, New York isn't as good as you think they're going to be, and Boston isn't as good as you think they're going to be, that really limits the field to Tampa Bay, who's been absolutely ridiculous, who you guys saw right up front. Yeah, absolutely incredible. And then a whole lot of, Toronto's decent. Baltimore's pretty good. So it's really hard to gauge right now. I think they've played a perfectly reasonable schedule. But when I saw someone post that the Guardians or that the Twins had played 11-11 against non-Royals teams, one, that's still first place in this division. And two, we can't just sit here and pretend that the Guardians haven't played the Marlins and the A's and the Nationals. I mean, they've played some pretty poor teams too. So at the end of the day, I think the Twins have played a decent schedule, but not like rolling the rock up the hill, proverbially speaking.
Yeah, I've always been a believer of, hey, you play and you try to beat the team that you're given. I mean, it's just, you're not making the schedule, and urgency, I think, is important early on, April and May. We haven't seen that from our White Sox, but that's a whole nother story. Before the season started, you and I got together with other lockdown hosts from the AL Central, and we talked about where we thought our teams would land by the end of the year. And I tried to stick up for my Chicago White Sox because I truly did believe the roster that they had on paper, if health was something that we were going to get, we would see a completely different type of product that we have seen so far. Sketchy on the bullpen, and I thought at least three of our starters could hang, but you were really bullish on the Minnesota Twins, and from a depth vantage point and what happened in the offseason. I was wondering if you could just expand a little bit on what you meant by that and what was so critical that the Twins did this offseason to set them up for success right now.
I think you see a lot of times that teams, when we make rosters in the offseason of like what are the teams going to do in the offseason? What's our dream roster? Who do we want to see these teams go after? It's very easy to go 9 deep, your starting lineup, and then your bench is your rookies and a couple extra guys, and maybe someone you bring on a minor league deal. Well, that's all good and well if you can keep people healthy, but that's never a guarantee. And last year the Twins had some injury issues. I mean, the numbers show it was a lot of games missed. Was it necessarily the sole reason the Twins were not particularly good? No, not really. Having Dylan Bundy and Chris Archer comprise 40% of your rotation and only go 4 innings per game is going to tax an already weak bullpen. And, it's a domino effect there. But the figuring that I had done was, if you can fix those margins to where you're not dipping into someone like Jermaine Palacios at shortstop, it's a whole lot better if you have Carlos Correa and then your next line of defense is Kyle Farmer, who either comes off the bench or starts every now and then, but has played like 1,000 big league games or whatever it is. It's preferable to have Donovan Solano, who's been a part of some pretty good Giants teams. It's preferable to have Michael A. Taylor, who's kind of the linchpin of this whole thing. You look at him, he's got 293 on base and he's striking out like almost every other time, but he's playing great defense in center and he's popped a couple homers. He's had a couple bunts that were pretty clutch, which one of them was against actually the White Sox. Probably sure you're still reeling from that one, but they've had enough depth to weather some storms. Max Kepler dealing with injuries, Joey Gallo dealing with injuries, to the point where they're not filling those spots with guys who really don't have any business being in the big leagues. And now they're starting to get healthy again. Alex Kirilloff's healthy. He absolutely crushed AAA and his rehab, and they sent him back. They just don't have a spot for him right now. So also too, behind the plate is very, very valuable. When Yasmani Grandal is at his best, you can see the difference that a great catcher can make. The Twins have 2 guys they really like back there, and especially Christian Vasquez, a World Series winning catcher 2 times over, I think. He's a great back there. There's just so many different elements of a team that they knew they were missing, and they attacked in the offseason. Now, again, the whole offseason is a bust if they don't get Correa, and they don't deserve as much credit for that as they may get. But at the end of the day, you're almost 30 games in and in first place, so it is what it is.
Yeah. Before we get into segment 2, just speaking of the offseason, from a Sox fan perspective, we thought maybe the biggest thing the White Sox were going to do was, the Luis Ariz trade. Like that's like the Sox won the offseason because that happened, because we weren't making any moves. Nothing was going to be done by our front office. And I know forever there'll be Sox fans that just cannot stand Ariz for what he did, breaking up Dylan Cease's no-hitter at the end of last season. He really ate our lunch all of last year, and I think we were so thankful to get him off the Twins. But what you got back in return, that's a scary pitcher. That's a dynamite arm. We saw it last time we were in Target Field. We let him off the hook, and then he looked like a completely different pitcher for the rest of the game. We couldn't touch any of his stuff. How happy have you been with that trade?
Yeah, what was that, like 23 straight? He retired after the first inning, and then they lifted him for Thielbar, I think, against Benintendi. It's been great. I mean, to the point where they've already actually signed him to an extension. I mean, it's not necessarily A plus B equals C, but the fact that he's performed kind of makes that all give you kind of like that nice warm feeling that it all makes sense. The last 2 starts have been a little uneven, but he's been battling a blister and then some cold weather. He's pitched in Miami for a long time, so cold weather is probably a little new to him. But for the most part, yeah, he's been as advertised. And the nice thing about this rotation is if you had to pick who you'd want to start a game for you on any given night, you have more than one option. There was times not that long ago where you wouldn't want any of the guys, and now you could probably pick any of the top 3 and say, hey, we got a chance to win tonight if we can score 3 runs. So Pablo has been phenomenal. He's changed up his pitch repertoire a little bit. Now, granted, these last 2 games, he hasn't had a feel for his sweeper because of that blister, but the sweeper has been good. The velocity is fairly solid, 95. He'll pop a 96 every now and then. And the changeup is what I saw when I found out the Twins were trading for him. I watched YouTube videos because, as one does, and I watched that changeup, and it's a treat to watch, and I've absolutely loved watching it. But I think he could use it even more when he's back to good, because it's such a good pitch. But he's been such a delight to watch.
Yeah, I think we're going to see him, I think on Wednesday, perhaps the third game of this series. We'll see how all the matchups still play out. But after we pay some bills here, I'm going to talk about current trends for the Twins, how things might change, how they might stay the same during the month of May. So more on that with Brandon Warne of Locked On Twins. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Buying tickets to your favorite event shouldn't be stressful. Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you, with killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guaranteed. You can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. Forget planning months in advance. Gametime has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event. Get exclusive flash deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. The Gametime guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section or row for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Today's episode is also brought to you by Sorare, our new sponsor. Sorare is a revolutionary fantasy baseball game and marketplace, transforming fans into owners with officially licensed digital cards featuring players from across all 30 MLB teams. Unlike other fantasy games, Sorare managers truly own their fantasy experience, collecting, buying, selling, and competing with player cards against global opponents to win epic rewards. Win or lose, you still own your cards, and there's no cost to play. Plus, the more you win, the more you advance, collecting increasingly powerful cards and accessing next-level competition and rewards. Head to sorare.com/lockedon. That's spelled SORARE.com to draft your team of freight players, Set your lineup and start competing today to win epic rewards. Again, that's sorare.com/locked-on to start playing today. The White Sox play the Minnesota Twins on Tuesday night on the South Side. Michael Kopech on the hill to kick things off. Catch every pitch of the White Sox hometown broadcast with Sirius XM on the SXM app. Search White Sox. Talking with Brandon Warne of Locked On Twins. I believe the Sox will be seeing Joe Ryan on Tuesday night. Can Ryan continue his winning ways? Pretty impressive so far.
Well, and not only that, but he doesn't do it with any traditionally like knock you over sort of stuff. You know, if you face peak Justin Verlander, you know what you're getting. Big time fastball and great command, all that stuff. Max Scherzer, all the same. With Ryan, it's just he's around the zone. He's got good stuff, high fastball, and he just competes. And I think he's got something like a 36-4 strikeout to walk ratio. He's going out there every single time out and giving the Twins a chance to win. And all those meaningless platitudes that you lump on a guy who's pitching well. And he's doing that right now, and has to be one of the finest trades the Twins have made in a long time, getting him for about a month and a half of Nelson Cruz for the Rays. So, yeah, he might even be, you know what? I can't even say it. I was going to say he might be the guy you'd go to if you want a one-game start for the Twins.
Wow.
But honestly, it's probably actually going to be Sonny Gray, who you won't see in this series.
Yeah, it's just pitching. It's something we always talk about. When you think you've got enough pitching, go out and try to get more pitching. And just to have, you can't have just two guys or even three guys. You have to have a complete rotation. Then you have to have guys that can fill in, because you're going to have injuries. It's a long haul. It's a long season. Pretty impressive stuff from Ryan so far. Byron Buxton plays in 26 games this season. And, we've been watching from, the other side in the division, the Chicago White Sox, seeing what has gone on with him over the years and the health issues. We've been dealing with the same stuff on our team with guys like Moncada and Eloy and Robert. Not as long as you guys have been dealing with the Buxton stuff, but he seems to be healthy. I mean, this is a question you just can't answer, but what are your thoughts? What is your feelings? What's your guts if he can stay healthy throughout this season and keep producing?
Well, the curiosity of it all is how long are they going to keep him at DH? Because so far it's hard to argue against it working. Running into Lenyn Sosa, I'm not sure how to say that correctly.
Lenyn.
That notwithstanding, and that didn't cost him any games. They went into New York and he played every game after that. Struck out like 10 times in 11 plate appearances or something like that. So he might have been a little worse for the wear. But as far as it's come, keeping him healthy, and again, Michael A. Taylor filling in capably defensively, are you creating Buxton in the aggregate? Not necessarily, because Michael A. Taylor as a DH with a 294 on base, probably not going to be ideal. But again, Byron Buxton is more valuable on the field than off the field. That's math that nobody can dispute. And so far, so good. I don't know if they're going to ease him back into center. I don't know if they're going to throw him back in center. I really doubt that. But I don't know if they're going to put him back in center. There's really no clarity to this point. Some people have said late May, early June. To this point, though, I mean, you just got to kind of keep going with what works. And so far it works. And he's absolutely pasting the ball. If they throw fastballs up, he's driving them 450 feet to left. His plate coverage is great. Every hit he's had in the last week has been an extra base hit. The same is true for Joey Gallo. I actually pulled those numbers on the podcast that I silently recorded today. And it's been just a wild ride. And I think if Buxton stays healthy, they can ride that wave a little bit. Because if you look at the offensive numbers, they're not that impressive. 21st in average, 23rd in on-base percentage, 15th in OPS. You'd expect a little more. But if you dial back 2 weeks, they're in the mid to lower 20s. And in those marks. So they've come a long way, and I think Buxton is a big part of that. So they'll go as far as he can carry them. Is that to say he's going to stay healthy? Absolutely not, for sure.
Yeah, very similar to our Eloy Jimenez situation, where we don't want to see him out in the outfield. He's a danger to himself and to others when he's out in the outfield. Rather have him at DH, and that's what he's been doing And he stayed relatively healthy. He had a hamstring issue that kept him out for maybe 7 days, but he just hasn't been producing. I mean, he's just is not the power hitting guy. I thought he was going to be a beast offensively, yet he's been able to kind of stay for the most part in the lineup. So it's just interesting from your perspective with Buxton. You mentioned Joey Gallo. What did you like about that signing? Was that a guy that you wanted the Twins to bring in? Because from a White Sox fan perspective, it was like Gallo, Benintendi. Who are the Sox going to eventually go with? Because we know we're not going to go for the big premier, outfielders that are out there.
With Gallo, I mean, my whole bit is that they're the "we can fix him" in air quotes Twins.
Yeah.
That it, for better or worse, they'll find flawed players or more likely broken players and try to rebuild them. And for the most part, it hasn't really worked. Now with Gallo, I mean, it's early. A lot can happen from May on. But there was a really good article in Baseball Prospectus by Robert Orr that had talked about how Gallo was laying off changeups, and that was a big Achilles heel for him because he's hit like a $182 in his career against them with like a 3-something slugging. Now, a $182 is not that far from his career average, so maybe it's not that big of a deal. But if he can continue to progress to the point where even if he just hits 230, 240, and that's a big jump for a guy like that, suddenly he's a 3 or 4 win player because defensively he's pretty solid. He's been really good at first base. They don't need as much help in right field right now that Max Kepler's kind of turned it back on. Trevor Larnach's been good in left. But he's been everything they could have imagined and more. It's just now, do they get to a point where they kind of fall in love with him and offer him a 3-year deal for good money because he's been that good and then he falls apart again? I'm 1 foot in, 1 foot almost, the other foot almost in on him, but I still need to see just a little bit more. But man, he's been quite a find.
Yeah, for Benintendi with us, boy, I thought we were going to get so much more pop. I didn't think he was going to, lead the team in home runs or anything, but something by now. He gets on base. I mean, he gets his hits, and the bar is so low for us with corner defenders. It was like, well, hey, at least we got an actual left fielder, and he had some experience with Grifol, but we're waiting for that. We're waiting for that power, and it's not difficult to hit a home run at Sox Park.
Well, and for the longest time, I feel like the Sox identity was they could really hit, but the on base skills kind of were not really there. I mean, Jose Abreu was never a big on base guy by itself. He'd have a high average and get on base. But it was Benintendi was kind of what the doctor ordered at the top of that order to at least set the table. Granted, now it's without Abreu, but that really didn't affect why they signed him or not. But I think I see the vision with Benintendi, and then the kind of hope would probably be, I don't know, he pops 12, 15 homers.
Right. Yeah.
Lifts the ball a little bit, which, even if you hit the ball hard, if you don't lift it that much, that's still more outs than you want to make. So I understood the vision. It certainly hasn't panned out, and there's certainly a lot of time left on that contract. But yeah, I understand wanting a bit more, especially early on in the deal.
Yeah, I mean, the way it was, I think, going to go, at least I was hoping, is, he wouldn't be carrying the White Sox. It would be guys like Moncada, Jimenez, Robert Jr., even a little bit of Vaughn. And he might, he'll slip in there and keep the line moving and then pop one every now and then. With Anderson coming back, and he's going to go right back to the top of the order. We'll see how Grifol wants to match up the construction with Benintendi. But, in our final segment, I want to get to just really how the Twins are going to match up with the Sox. And I guess from my perspective, can the results be different for our Chicago White Sox? So more on that in a moment with Brandon Warne of Locked On Twins. Today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. It's so easy to get caught up in what everyone else needs from you and never take a moment to think about what you need from yourself. But when you spend all of our time giving, it can feel us feeling stretched thin out and burned out. Therapy can give you the tools to find more balance in your life so you can keep supporting others without leaving yourself behind. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist, and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Find more balance with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/LockedOnMLB today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnMLB. We've been talking with Brandon Warne of Locked On Twins, Sox Twins for 3 games coming up here. Twins in first place, playing 5 games over 500. Sox 8-21, 9 games back. They were on a 10-game losing streak. Snapped that with a walk-off home run in a sloppy game on Sunday with Andrew Vaughn going deep against the Rays. Brandon, who should White Sox fans, I guess, watch out for on this Twins roster right now? Who's hot? Who's dangerous?
Buxton, especially right now. I had pulled the numbers and he had like a 1,300 OPS over the last week. And again, that'll happen when everything you hit is an extra base hit and you strike out 20% of the time. So he's been exceptional and healthy. The guy that has really struggled is Carlos Correa, who I think we all kind of expect to turn it around in relatively short order. But beyond that, Polanco's been strong since he came back. Max Kepler's swinging it a little better. And then Jose Miranda got off to just a dreadfully slow start and has been much better of late. Same kind of deal that happened with him in his rookie season. In fact, what was funny with his rookie season was they brought him up and he was just horrible. And they sent him back and he didn't even report. He didn't even get to St. Paul. And then Royce Lewis messed up his knee and they brought him back. And from that point forward, that phantom trip to St. Paul, he was a completely different player. So I don't know if they flashed an Uber rate in front of his face on a phone saying, listen, buddy, you can go to St. Paul pretty easily if we find that to be necessary. But he's turned it around. Honestly, it's a balanced team, though. And that comes back to the depth where if you have a guy swinging it on a night or not swinging it, you know, the Twins being this good with Carlos Correa giving them almost nothing. I think if you had told people that back when we did that episode with Sully about a month and a bit of change ago, that I think people would be very surprised, to say the least.
Yeah. Not necessarily, I would say, against the White Sox. I mean, you got to worry about anybody at any day. But with regards to just the rest of this month and beyond, I mean, what are you personally, from a fan perspective, what are you worried about regarding the Minnesota Twins moving forward?
Well, they've put 2 starting pitchers on the IL in the last few days, or I guess it's not technically final yet with Tyler Mahle, but they're going to shut him down for a month and bring up Louis Varland, who I suspect you're going to see on Wednesday. It's, again, that depth. They were 8 deep in what they believe to be big league caliber starters, maybe a little deeper depending on if they would put, say, Brent Hedrick back there. He's been working out of the bullpen a little bit. But they're already into that depth pretty far. Now, with that said, has there been any indication that Lopez, Ryan, or Sonny Gray are going to need any extra time? No. And they've each gotten pushed back a little bit with the team bringing up Bailey Ober. Now, Bailey Ober is a guy who didn't make the rotation out of spring training and had like a 3.8 ERA with a strikeout per inning in his career. So, like, having a guy like that as your 6th option in your back pocket 10 miles away at St. Paul is certainly a nice thing to have. Again, you'll miss him too, so you guys won't see him until probably later in the season. But Louis Varland is the one that I think you guys are going to get to see maybe for the first time real up close and personal on Wednesday. And he seems to have taken another leap. He went from Division II pitcher in St. Paul here to, he's chucking at upper 90s. Eno Saris, who I used to work with at Fangraphs, has Stuff Plus that he's put together for AAA. I think it's Eno. And he had great numbers down there with St. Paul. But the fastball has spiked. He's got good secondary stuff. He's just interesting. He's one of those guys you take a flyer on in like the 12th round of a draft because he's a local kid and he's made good. So the fact that they've been able to go to that well so far is encouraging, but there's very few teams that can go deeper, much deeper than 7-8 deep before suddenly you're starting guys who either aren't ready or they're not starting for some very significant reason. So you just got to hope that guys stay healthy, and with pitching, you're hoping against hope because it's just the nature of the beast. Pitchers get hurt.
Yeah. Absolutely. And if you can get a couple spot starts out of some guys and maybe bats are hot to help out that pitcher at the time, there is a bit of a luck, but you can't rely on that.
Now I want to ask you, you guys have Cincinnati and then Kansas City on the road, granted, but do you guys view that as a chance to kind of make some, kind of chip away at getting back to 500? I always feel like when I'm watching a team that's under 500, it's like you set up little obstacles to knock down. It's, have a 500 week and then get back to 500 overall and then see where you're at. After this Twin series, and there's going to be a lot to prove in the Twin series, but who knows? It's at home. Are you sensing like this is where you'd really like to see them kind of gain some upward momentum or downward momentum, I guess, depending on how you look at it?
Yeah, I think April was one of the toughest schedules. The White Sox playing one of the toughest schedules in baseball. May is one of the easiest schedules. And I think if you do have hope for the Sox team to somehow rebound a little bit and start playing some better baseball, maybe it is in May. But again, if you're not playing fundamentally sound baseball, if you're not getting production and preparation and all the things, then it doesn't matter really who you're playing. So the Sox haven't won back-to-back games all season long. They haven't won a series yet up to this point. So the bar is low. I mean, if they could play, Pedro Grifol talks about going like 5 to 7 days at a time. And maybe he's more concentrated on series at a time or game at a time. But
yeah.
If they could play 500 baseball in May and just say, you know what, let's try to be 500 or maybe one game better, and then take that as a win and just gradually get a little bit better. But you have to be playing better baseball. It's just not going to happen like that. They have to have a better plan. Yep. They need their starters to go more than 4 or 5 innings. Right. Our bullpen, which is absolutely awful. Some guys just need to figure it out. We just need a better brand of baseball on the South side.
Well, and the kind of thing I come back to, it's an adage that I use on the game level and on the season level, is you can't win the game in the 6th inning. You can't win the division in May, but you can definitely lose it. And that's what you worry about when the season starts unraveling. And to say a season can feel like it's unraveling in a 10-game losing streak, that doesn't matter when it comes in the season. You start to kind of wonder. Now, again, you can tell yourself there's a lot of baseball left, but then you also think they've got to play a stretch of games where they're 13 games above 500 to counteract this start. So it's like, how do you eat an elephant piece by piece? Mm-hmm. You can't take it all at once. And I'm sure it's not unprecedented. I could pull some numbers and see how many teams have started with this record and made the playoffs, if it's 0, if it's a few. But again, why stop thinking it's possible? It's baseball. It's a child's game. Chase your dreams, chase what's possible, and see what happens.
Yeah, it's right now, I think it's one game at a time. Yep. Focus, don't look too far ahead, like stay in the moment, play just some solid baseball, like make sure the chemistry's okay, which I
definitely don't look behind either. Like,
yeah.
Forget behind and look not that far ahead. Just live today, every plate appearance, pitch, game. Yeah.
Yeah. The thing, I talk to other Sox fans in my life is like, well, yeah, the Sox could be playing some pretty good baseball, but like, let's not focus too much on the division, because the Twins and Guardians aren't going to stop playing and say, well, like, let's let the Sox catch up. And then, and then we'll start having some competition in June or July. They're going to keep winning because they're going to want to bury a team like the Sox that might get hot at some point throughout the season. So it should be an interesting series. I'm looking for a lot of different things, from my White Sox. Hungry for them to just win a series, but just play good baseball. I really appreciate you joining me, Brandon. Where can we find you? And obviously, where can we find Locked On Twins?
Well, yeah, it's just like any other show on Locked On. Anywhere you get your podcasts, YouTube, and then also Access Twins. I post most of my stuff over there. It's Substack, super easy to get to. Very rarely do I have paid posts, but every now and then, got to keep the lights on. But I'd love to have people come check that out. And again, too, also, if you're Twins fans checking this out, Locked On Sox, you gotta check it out. I love that you guys got Locked On Sox and it's not Boston. For once, the Midwest keeps winning. So yeah, I am so proud of you guys. I was looking for Locked On White Sox the other day, and I couldn't find it on, I think it was Twitter, and it said Locked On Sox. And I'm like, oh yeah, the Red Sox didn't get something for once.
So I'm assuming way back when, then Locked On White Sox was the first one that got a Locked On show, and they
Must
got.
have been.
I mean, that's the only thing I can think of, but yeah, that is a mini victory because I lived on the East Coast for just a couple years way back when, and I'd wear an old school Sox hat that just had SOX, and the amount of people that would come up to me be like, "Oh, that's an interesting Boston Red Sox hat." I'm like, it's not. It's the White Sox.
No,
and
it's not.
Let's not even have this conversation. You have no concern about the White Sox. So
yeah, just leave it alone.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate it, Brandon. Hopefully we can talk throughout the season. Thank you so much.
Be good.
Folks, thank you so very much for making this podcast part of your daily routine. You can find the Locked On White Sox podcast absolutely everywhere you find your podcast. We're on Twitter at Locked On Sox. You can find me on Twitter at Nick_GGTB. Hey, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. White Sox take on the Minnesota Twins. Michael Kopech on the hill. Catch every pitch of the White Sox hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search White Sox. Thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day. Hey, everydayers, on the next episode, I will recap Michael Kopech's outing and hopefully be talking about a White Sox winner. That would be 2 in a row. I really appreciate you making time for the Locked On White Sox podcast. I'm Nick Murawski. Until next time, go Sox.